Some insurance companies believe that a significant proportion of whiplash claims filed in Britain today may be exaggerated or totally false. For doctors, trying to distinguish between real claims and fake ones isn't easy.
Declan, come on ahead.
Thanks for seeing me.
Hi there.
How you doing?
Please have a seat there. And first of all, we'll start at the top of the head. So, any problem when I do that?
No, that's fine.
No, great. I want you to look way up in the air for me. That's extension. And a way down, forward, far as you
Rodney Peyton is a leading medical assessor for whiplash. But whiplash doesn't show up on any x-rays or scans, so in the end it comes down to whether the patient sounds plausible.
To say that somebody's lying is very, very difficult. If you tell me right now you've got a sore neck, I have no idea. You tell me you've got a sore neck, I have to accept you say that.
So you have to give me
So
the
I look
benefit.
underneath that. I give you the benefit of the doubt, and if everything is reasonable, then it's reasonable.
What is whiplash?
Whiplash is a mechanism of injury. A lot of lay people think that that's a specific thing from a road traffic accident. The actual problem is what we call a musculoskeletal strain injury to the neck. In other words, someone has hurt their neck or their back in a road traffic accident. So the name doesn't mean very much, and it gets people tied up in knots, really.
So it can apply to all sorts of different...
All sorts of
injuries.
different things. But basically, you're talking about someone who has been hurt in a road traffic accident.
Now, as you know, I don't have whiplash, but if I
Yeah.
came into you and said that I had a sore neck, what kind of things would you be looking for to make sure that I wasn't faking it?
Three things we look for are consistency, congruency, and reasonableness. If you tell me you've got a sore neck, I can't tell one way that you say it, then you have it. So I'm looking, is your story consistent? Are your movements congruent? What you say you can do and what I can find that you can do, do they match? And is it reasonable in the circumstances? So those are the things that are going through my mind when I'm questioning you or when we're doing an examination, so that I can see whether or not, in my opinion, everything matches.
And if you were to ask me questions, what kind of things would you ask, and what might make you suspicious?
I'm going to start by saying the vast majority of people, there's nothing to be suspicious about. So I don't start off assuming that people are lying to me. It's a matter of going through their story, because some people, there are fraud cases out there. We all know the case in England of a bus that has an accident and suddenly there are more people claiming they were on the bus. That's blatant fraud. In my opinion, that does not happen that often. But people are hurt, and then their own personality comes in on top of that. You know, there are people who are drama queens and always exaggerate everything, and they're inclined to push the boundaries a bit. The vast majority of people I see are very straightforward, and therefore if I can find it's consistent, congruent and reasonable, then, you know, we take it from there.
Have you noticed an increase in the number of people trying to get a fake injury past you?
Not specifically, no.
That's remained pretty constant?
Pretty constant.
And how many people out of, if you say, so I'll say 50 people a week, how many do you think would be...
Actual fraud, that they didn't have an injury, would be maybe 1 in 20, 1 in 30, something down there. Or that if they did have an injury, it was minimal. But as I said, there's all sorts of levels of people who exaggerate a bit, and that may be just their personality, the way they feel, maybe, you know, what their personality was before the accident they bring with them through the accident. So to some people, you know, pain may have different effects. So it's trying to get underneath that and say, well, physically this is what happened, and this is what I expect to happen in the future, is what really I'm here about.
Is it a difficult injury to diagnose for definite, in that, you know, these injuries will be soft tissue, won't they? So is it basically a difficult thing for you to tell whether someone is lying or not?
There are things, we go back to those three: consistency, congruity and reasonableness. To say that somebody's lying is very, very difficult. If you tell me right now you've got a sore neck, I have no idea. You tell me you've got a sore neck, I have to accept you say that.
So you have to give me
So I look underneath that. I give you the benefit of the doubt, and if everything is reasonable, then it's reasonable. A lot of people that come for examination actually are maybe 2, 3, 4 months after an accident. They'll come and tell me their pain is gone. And I'm looking at them from a point of view of saying, is there anything residual? So there may be nothing to find in the first place. It's a history of what happened before. So it's subjective, and that's a matter for the court.
So you have to believe that, really?
Well, I have to believe that, and if they tell me they're better and there's nothing to find, all I can say on medical science is they say they're better and there's nothing to find, and their story's reasonable.
So do you want to walk me through the kind of physical exam that you might give someone to see what their injury might be like?
Sure. We start with the history. I mean, that's where I start to get the reasonables thing, looking at what happened in this car accident, if that's what we're talking about. Were you moving, were you stationary, were you hit from behind, the front or the side?
Tell me, what if someone is hit at a very low speed? Because there's a lot of controversy at the moment, isn't there, about, you can't get whiplash at 5 or 6 miles an hour. What do you think?
You can hurt your neck at a low speed. It entirely depends what you're doing at the time. I mean, we think of the dodgems. If you're on a dodgem and you're going at that sort of speed, you're waiting to be hit. So you're tensed and you're holding on. So as you move, your neck is being held steady. And the likelihood in you hurting yourself is fairly low. Even though if you go to a dodgem car, you will see a notice on the side that people with bad necks shouldn't get on. But if you're not waiting for it and you're hit, then your body moves forward, leaving your neck behind. And it can happen in sport. It can happen as slip and fall in the bathroom. You can hurt your neck. So the question isn't whether this mythical whiplash comes out, it's whether or not it is reasonable to say you were hurt. And yes, you can get hurt. I think most people would accept above 5 to 7 miles an hour.
What do you make of, the insurance industry say that a huge number of whiplash claims at the moment are exaggerated or outright fraudulent. What do you make of that?
Well, they're looking at it from their point of view, and obviously from their point of view they don't want to pay up. So they're looking, and they will be aware of people like that bus accident that are blatantly fraudulent, and they don't want to do that. On the other hand, that is not my function. I'm in the middle. The function is of an officer of the court. I'm neither for the plaintiff or the defendant. My function is an officer of the court. In fact, I have to sign a declaration to say that's exactly the job I'm doing. So when they come to me, I am in the middle. I listen, I take the history, I do a physical, and I decide whether it's consistent, congruent, and reasonable in the circumstances.
So your function really is to, someone is telling you something, you have to give them the benefit of the doubt to say that what they're telling you is true, and basically you're there to find out if it sounds reasonable.
Yes. And if on the examination what they say they can't do, they can't do. I mean, if you say I can't turn my head, and then I look at them putting on a coat and they turn their head round like that to put on a coat, that's not consistent, and their actions aren't congruent, So those sort of things may come up. Or they may tell me they've never been in an accident before, and then I get the medical notes that says they saw their GP 3 weeks ago and they had a sore neck for other reasons. So you look at the previous notes, you look at their records, you look at what they say, and you come to an all-round conclusion.
There's a few things about this physical exam that really could make you ask questions.
There are a few,
in the wrong way.
There are a few very obvious things, okay? But, I'd reiterate, most people don't have any of that. And if people tell me, they're fine when they come to see me and there's nothing to find, well then, I've nothing to say except there's nothing to see. Their history sounds reasonable, and they're better, and that's a matter for the court. That's way beyond. That's nothing to do with the medical side.
So you have to give them the benefit of the doubt. If what they say sounds reasonable, even if they say they no longer have any pain.
If it sounds reasonable, then I say from a medical point of view that is reasonable.
Yes.
That's all I can do.
You're not putting
the rest of it's a matter for the court, or for the solicitors and the other side to talk out. I can just say what they're saying is reasonable. It matches, 80% plus of what happens to most people with a short-term problem. And it's up to other people to decide, from witnesses, from other evidence, whether or not it's a reasonable thing that happened.
Do you think if someone was kind of schooled in the right things to say, that it would be easy for them to convince the court and get through your exam and convince the court that they did have whiplash when they didn't?
I don't think it'd be terribly easy. You'd have to be consistent all the way through, because not only would I see you, but if you're complaining that, someone else will probably see you as well. We actually would compare reports and see that what you said to the hospital, what you said to the doctor, what you said to me, what instructions you gave to your solicitor, what you said to another doctor, what instructions you gave further on to someone else, and what you say in a witness box would all have to be aligned. That's not as easy. A one-off might be easy to carry it, but you're looking then at multiple looks. So you have a multi-source feedback on this person, if you like, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. So it's not just a matter of one thing. There's a lot of things you have to take into account.
So how difficult is it to say for sure whether someone has whiplash?
There's no certainty in any of it. If you tell me you have a problem with your neck, I have to start by assuming that that's what you have.
So you have to give me the benefit of the
I have to give you the benefit. Well, that sounds that we're always looking for fraud. If it's consistent, if it's congruent, and if it's reasonable in the circumstances, then yeah, it's not just the benefit of the doubt, but on balance of probabilities, which is the way the court put it, what you're saying is correct.
So as long as what I say sounds reasonable and it's not inconsistent, or I'm not saying something that makes you raise an eyebrow, then
that's right.
Then medically that sounds reasonable. So you're going to say, you're going to tell that to the
and
court.
what I find in examination is consistent. In other words, if you've nothing to find, you've nothing to find. But if you tell me, for instance, you've terrible trouble with the neck and turning, and then you take your coat off and you turn your head right round while you're doing it, that's not congruent. That doesn't match.
So it's not just in the actual physical exam that you'll be looking for things?
And also I see maybe your general practice notes, I see the accident emergency notes, and maybe another doctor's examined you. So we look at all those different records, and if the thing matches all the way through, then on the balance of probabilities, that's reasonable. Whereas if we find that you went to an accident emergency department complaining of one thing, you saw your doctor complaining of something else, you tell me something different to what you tell somebody, and the timings, and then it all starts to get mixed up. See, it's very hard to be consistent all the way through. You could tell me one thing in one interview, but you have a number of interviews, and you've seen your solicitor a couple of times, and you've given them an outline of what's happened, and maybe a written statement. So you put all that together, and that's where we're looking for things being reasonable and consistent.
It sounds like it's all a very nebulous thing. Like, obviously there are these kind of points in the system where you might raise an eyebrow or become suspicious, but basically it's a nebulous injury, difficult to diagnose in any one person. Am I right?
It's not a specific, in any one person. Statistically, look, if you're in a road traffic accident, number one question, can you hurt yourself in a road traffic accident? I think in all reasonableness, you turn around and say, yes, you can. So we start from that position. Instead of starting from the position that says, oh, well, they've had a road traffic accident, but nobody ever gets hurt in that. That would be a total nonsensical position, which some people might like, but it's just nonsensical. So there's a balance. Remember, I used the word reasonableness in all of this. So it's consistency, congruency, and reasonableness. You tell me of a sore neck, I can't tell whether you have or not.
But so the point, that's the point for the insurers. They're saying when it comes to whiplash claims that a huge number of them, possibly even the majority of whiplash claims, are fraudulent or exaggerated. What do you say to that?
No, I'd find that very unlikely. Fraudulent, very few in my experience. There certainly are fraudulent cases, such as has been talked about, that case in England of the bus, of the political party that ended up with more people being injured than were in the bus. That's blatant fraud, and who can deal with that? That's just what it is. But outside of that, do people exaggerate? Yeah, people do exaggerate. People exaggerate things in life. To some people, having a car accident is an absolute drama. What about if my children were there? What could have happened? And that all adds to their sense of stress. Other people, it was a prank and I'm off with it and it's okay. I had a bit of a sore neck for a while, but it's better. So there are a lot of personalities that were there before the accident, all of which impact on the way people react to pain or the fact that an accident occurred. So you have to start sifting through that and try to get down to the baseline, which is really what we're trying to do.
It sounds pretty complicated.
It takes experience.